Okay, so I'm Erwin from Austria. I have a little bit of a cold, so I hope my voice doesn't get lost somewhere in between, but we'll see how far we get. And I'm here today to talk about the Google Plus platform. It's something I've been working with since the beginning when they started opening up the API, so it's just my favorite toy to play with, so to speak. So, just to give you an overview of what the Google Plus platform includes, we have the REST API, which allows you to access public data from Google Plus. You have the Hangouts API, which allows you to write applications which run inside of the Hangout with possibilities to communicate between the participants of the Hangout. Then still in developer preview, then new is the History API, which allows you to write moments, so to speak, to a private place on Google Plus. It's like you have +1s which are public, but you can write several moments to a private place, and then you say, okay, I want to share this with these people. Then on the website you have plugins, you have a +1 button, you have share button, you have profile badges, page badges which you can display. And also fairly new are the mobile SDKs, so the Android SDK is now available for full, so you can already start using it in applications for Android devices from 2.2 upwards, I think, I'm not sure. And then there's also for iOS an SDK, which is still in developer preview. And those SDKs allows you to sign users in using the Google Plus profile. So you can personalize applications based on the Google Plus data, and then you have the possibility to also include +1 and share buttons in your application. And for the Android side, you can also write, if you are a developer before you use your application to write automatically into the history. I did a similar talk about a year ago or something when the platform was still new. The talk was a little bit shorter then. So we had one +1 button which could be used, and we had a subset of what the REST API can use at the moment. So as you see, a year ago this talk would have been a little bit shorter. So let's skip that.
Is this a modem?
What?
This sound is connecting with the modem. So you hear it?
No, it's from the batch printer.
So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the REST API, which allows you to access several resources publicly available. The things you can access, so you read the public data, you don't need user authentication for this API, and it's just you send out GET requests and you get JSON in response. So fairly easy. There are different resources you can access. You can access people with the name, description, links, education, jobs. You can access activities. Those are posts with the contents. You have date, you have geolocation, images, which people have +1 posts, which people have reshared. And you also get access to the comments. And so the easiest place to actually start playing around with the API, I'm just going to switch here, is the API Explorer. How many people have used the API Explorer before for any of the APIs? So those APIs, the API Explorer came when they started their new REST API system with a unified discovery for APIs. And so we're going to just start. I see it's a little bit small. I'm going to just make this more easily. So the first request I'm going to talk about is the people.get, which allows you to get information about one person if you have the user ID. So you just supply the user ID, and then when we execute this request, what we get is, so you see the request URL is googleapis.com/plus/version1/people, and then just the ID. And for all those requests, you actually need an API key, which you can get in the API console. So I'm just going to quick over here. If you look at the console, when it's loading, I'm just going to switch to the DevFest now. So what you do in the console, you create a new project and you say what services you want to use. And in this case, we are going to use the Google Plus APIs. And then you request API access, and here you can get the on the one hand, if you need authentication, you can get your OAuth information, and you can also get your API key, which you need in all non-authenticated requests. So if you take a look at the response here, you see you get a JSON object which has several values. You have the URLs, which I have linked on my profile. You get the display name, first name, last name. You get stack line, about me. You get organizations you have linked, if it's education or work. Places you've lived. So actually everything you make public on your Google Plus profile can be retrieved with this. And one example where you could use it easily, let's see, I've written a short template. You can actually use this, make a short JavaScript widget to just display your profile information in some sort on a website. So if you take a look at take a look at the source. So I just have some CSS, and what I'm using here in this case is they actually have a client library for all sorts of different languages. In this case I'm using the JavaScript client library, and in this case when the client is ready, I just set my API key, I load the Plus API, and then I can just use simple requests to, where do I have it? Yeah, in this case I just call people.get with my user ID, and then I get the JSON object and can extract the information and just display it in the DOM somehow. So actually you can do this in JavaScript, you can do it PHP, whatever language you prefer, you have client libraries available for that. And you see in this page I have my profile, I have GDG Zürich rendered. And then there are actually 3 different errors you will occur when you try to access the API. If you use some ID which doesn't exist, you get the unable to map ID, then when you just enter some non-numeric value, you get, yeah, it doesn't accept that. And then for the people.get, you have the special case of the me. This is when you do an authenticated request. The user who is authenticated, you can retrieve his profile information just by replacing the user ID with me. But you need to go through the OAuth, you need an OAuth access token for this. So, let's see. Then after the people.get, you can also search for people, simply with a query string. And in this case, when we execute the query, I'm just searching for DevFest here. You can actually also define how many results you want to return, so you can decide up to a maximum of 20 results, and then you have a page token which you can use to access more results. And let's just see what we get here. So in this case, you only get a subset of the information about the person, so you just get the user ID, you get the display name, you get the profile and the profile picture. But then, since you have the ID, you can then use the people.get results to get more people. So I have another example here. So if you just do a simple search for DevFest, you see there are several DevFest page profiles on Google+. And let's see. And if you combine this with the viewer we did before, so this now does a search and then does the .get to get the full profile information about the people, and then you can, well, do with the information whatever you want. So this is probably just those examples, they will be public afterwards. They're just small code snippets to see what the API can do. So the more interesting part is probably the activities. So what you can do with activities, you can either search for activities, again with a keyword, or you can list activities for one user. So you decide, I want to see all the activities by GDG Zürich, for example, and you can get a pageable list, and you can actually use this to go back to the very first post in the API. And let's just see how a result looks like. So again, you supply a user ID. At the moment you can only access the public collection, so maybe at one point they will open up this for private, limited, whatever. You can define the maximum results again, this time up to 100 per page. And let's just execute. And if we look at the response here, so let's see, we have the items. So what you have the title of the post, which is basically the first 100 something characters of the post text. You have a published date, an updated date. You have the activity ID, which is unique for, so you can use this if you want to access a specific ID, you can use this one. You have who made the post. You have so you have here again the actor information, just simple, and then the most of the information is inside of the object. So you have the full. So you have the full text with HTML markup in it, which you can just put in a website and it displays correctly. And in this case, okay, this is a great example for post. So there are different kinds of posts. For example, this post I just showed you, it was just uploaded a photo to an event, and those event posts aren't fully supported in the API yet. So yeah, that's a better one. So here you get the full content, which has markup in it. You have links to, you see, you have 4 comments, you have 22 people who plus one the post, you have no reshares in this example. And then you also have attachments, which in this case are photos, but attachment can also give you a link to an article, it will be the link to the article. And you also see this post, this came from mobile, but you have different providers, if it's a check-in, if it's directly on Google+, if it's from a different application altogether. So maybe the most, let's see if I can find something. We have one here. No. Okay, let's try this here. So again, let's wrote a small snippet which would allow you to just display your recent posts on your website, for example, a widget which probably many people would like. You have Twitter widgets like that. This is just, again, just a few lines of code. And as you see, I can have access to the photo. And let's see if we have, so here we have posts for GDG Zürich. And in this case here, this one is a reshare, so I'm gonna I'm going to use this ID because one of the most difficult things in my opinion, which isn't clear from the documentation, is how you recognize if a post has been reshared or is original. So if we execute this, oh, wrong one. This one. No, still wrong. So in this case, we have so in this case, if you have a reshare, you will have the original, so the person who reshared this will be the actor, but then you have the object.actor, which will be the original content of the post. So if you have a reshare, the original content of the post will be inside of the object, and the information about the reshare will be outside. So in this case, you have the object.id here is actually the ID of the original post, and is different from this ID here, which is the ID of the reshare. So that's actually, if you have an object.id which is different from the ID outside, you can know this is a reshare and can display the post accordingly. And you actually, in this case here, you have also an annotation, which is the text that has been added by the resharer to the post. So you have, so you know the difference between the content, and if we look at the post, how did I put it? Post document. So in this case, the text outside here will be the annotation, and then you have the content of the post, which is the text which is displayed inside. So the same way you can search for people, you can also search for activities, and I'm just going to quickly show you the example here. Activities.search, and in this case, we see this is actually a live DevFest wall at the moment, so it will refresh if somebody wants to post something quickly with the hashtag. So actually what you do, like the people.search, you supply a parameter which you want to search for, and then you have some more parameters which you can access. You can define a language parameter. So the important thing about this language parameter is it isn't a filter, it's just a ranking. So if you search best results, it will rank languages also posts in this language better than other posts. If you search for recent entries, then you won't see a difference in the results, which is a bit stupid in my opinion, but it's an open issue I try to get them to fix. So you have the order by parameter. So if you search by best, and this only if you search by best, the language parameter will actually have any influence. If you search by recent, you will really just get the recent posts. And one important thing that's to note about all the searches, as well as people as activities, is if you do a new search, you might get completely different results than the previous search because of the way the data centers communicate with each other. You actually get a cached subset, and then you page for your cached subset. When you do a new search, there might be activities that just appear in the middle. So, let's see let's see, where are my slides? So we did the activities to search. You can get one single activity as well, which is in most cases not really relevant. And then if you have the activity ID, which is the set something long ID string, you can access, for example, the comments for this post. So what I did on one of my, it's just let's see. It's just one of my pages really, and when it loads at some point. Actually what I'm doing here at the bottom is I'm including comments from Google Plus post to have some sort of commenting system on my website. So this actually links back to a post on a page I created for my page.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah.
It's off topic, so apologies. Is there an equivalent for LinkedIn? Accessing user comments in LinkedIn? Something I would love to be able to do.
I haven't played with LinkedIn APIs, sorry.
Sorry.
But I think they probably have some API too. So what I'm doing here is actually I have created my Google Plus page where I have one entry, one post for each entry I have on my pseudo blog. And what I'm doing is I'm actually searching so I'm just gonna, it'll be easier to show you in the source code, if you find it. So what I'm doing here is actually I have my page ID here, and what I do, I search the recent posts of this page to find the post which matches the link. So I'm getting the canonical link if I have one, and then I'm just going through the recent requests. And when I find one where I have an article attached which has the same URL that I'm looking for, I know that I have. So if I find one that matches my current URL, I know that I have found the activity ID that I'm looking for, and then I just go on, and with this activity ID I fetch the comments for this activity ID and then I display them on my page. So in this case I'm not using the API client, I'm just using the jQuery.get in this case, which works just the same. And that way, usually the problem is that there's no easy way to get the activity ID outside of the API, because there's no mapping between the URL of a post and the activity ID. You can find the activity ID somewhere in the source hidden, but it's not really a nice way. So the easiest way to get the activity is actually list the activities and then choose the one activity you want. So that's why I'm doing it that way in this case. So otherwise you would have for each of the pages I want comments on, you would have to first define the activity ID and get the comments with it, but that way it just automatically retrieve it. So, let's see. Yeah, and you can also get people who +1 and reshared the post. What you can't get easily is actually the reference to the reshared post. So you know those people have reshared, but again you can't tell which is the post that have reshared. And that's a problem that I've been trying to fix in some way. Because sometimes it's interesting, so I don't know how many know the ripples diagrams in Google+. They show you actually the reshares for, so for the people who don't know it, I'm just going to show it quickly. If you find a reshared post somewhere. Actually the easiest is to go to, for those cases is just explore. And let's go to view ripples. And actually that's a diagram that shows you that's been the original post and then it's been spread out in all kinds of directions via reshares. What you don't get in this diagram is actually you don't see what people are talking about. So you don't see the comments on those reshares. So to fix this problem, you have to solve this problem in several steps. So the first thing you need is, of course, you need the activity ID of the post you're interested in what way ever. Then what you do, you get for this activity ID, you get all the people who reshared the post. And in the next step, for each of those people, you get the activities, all of them, which can be many. So in most cases, you will restrict it to the last recent 100 and won't go back further in the past. And this gives you a list of all posts of the resharers. And then you go through all those posts and check if any of those have the reshare ID of my original activity ID. And with this you get a list of all public reshares of your post. And then in your last step for each of those reshares you get the comments on each of these, and then you can make a merged view of all of this. So it's
a bit of normalizing could help us, yeah? A bit of normalization of this.
Yeah,
it would be nice. Yeah, it's foreign keys.
Because the problem is in this case you need, so it's, let's say that 100 people have reshared the post. So you need your 100. You have one request to get the people. That's easy. You need 100 requests to get all the posts, and then you need another 100 to get the comments on those posts. So you're up to 200 requests to the API already. So that's quite a lot, so, but I actually did it. So, does anybody know the comment tracker? So that's a tool that allows, what the idea behind the comment tracker is that you accumulate comments from various sources in one continued stream, especially for live YouTube events. It was the original idea, Hangouts on the Air. And so, we're actually going to go back to this post here. Let's take the link address. Let's set the URL. Let's see if this works. So in this case, I only have one post with the comments associated with this post, but I want to have the comments on the reshares as well. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to check for reshares, and it's going to fetch all those posts. Might take a while. Slow connection. And actually, if we look here, and we might be lucky, so here's a different colored comment. It's a comment which comes from a different post in this case. So it actually merges the comments inside here. So yeah, it's still fetching reshares. So as you can see, there are lots of requests going on. So it might be easier if we just edit the URL to the request. But as you can see, there are many things you can do, but there are many ways to work around what you want to do. So I think that's been for that's so much for the Google Plus REST API. Are there any questions about this so far? Okay. So it said everything that people wanted to know. So what I'm going to talk about next is the history API. How many people have signed up for the history API preview, except for Stefan and Michel? Don't Martin. Okay,
We excluded.
Excuse me, one question. These bits of code, just because it's horrible to rehack these again, are you going to be posting these?
Yeah, actually they are already, I'm going to give the link, but I have the on my /DevFest where I have everything accumulated, including links to the slides and
Cool, thank you.
so and everything will be, so you have everything here for all the material. And I actually have it on NFC if you want to read it. So the history API.
Gerwin, there was a question. Yeah, question.
Hi. Are there plans for a write API?
So I don't know what Google plans, but there's actually in very limited availability. They have the Pages write API, which for example Hootsuite is already using, which allows you to write content to your Google Plus page. They are very restricted in using it, so I tried signing up for this several times, but no luck so far.
Okay.
And so they only want, at the moment they actually want, I think they want all the big social media players in there. And I think it will be a long time before we will see something like this for personal profiles. I think the main issue here is, I don't know how many of you have been using Google Plus before Google Plus. Yes.
For one post, yeah.
Yeah, so the problem with Google Plus was it has a really powerful API which allowed writing and stuff. And I've been playing with the Google Plus API before going to Google Plus. And so the Google Plus API, I had some analytics running because I had access to the Fire stream. And actually when you looked at it, there were people who just pushed out like 10,000s of posts each day. So you had like 99% crap in there, which was caused because they had a very open API which allowed you just simply writing into it.
There's an app for that, they call it Twitter.
Yeah, they are limiting the Twitter API now,
Yeah.
probably for the same reasons. So that, I think they've become very careful because of it, because Buzz in the end was really 99% crap and 1% of a small user group who was really using it. And so I think I'm very careful about that. But I'm hoping for the same thing, but we'll see.
I'm just asking because I actually deleted my profile because I'm pushing from my blog to all the other social media.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
but
pain
actually,
to actually maintain that just one thing.
Yeah. But actually the history API is some sort of allow you to write to Google Plus, which I'm going to get in now.
Okay.
I think you can post also per email or something like that.
I'm not sure. I think they had something like post per SMS in some countries.
Yes.
But
But it's not. I think it was some case to post per email or per SMS, but
Okay.
I have no idea that it's still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you know where Google Plus for Business is?
It's available for Google Apps account.
Oh,
So it's already available. And you actually, when you have signed up with a Google Apps account,
Yeah.
you actually have the possibility to post just to your company, and only people inside of your company will be able to read it.
Yeah.
So they already have that.
Okay.
So, history API. I think the best way to show the history API is to show you my history. I hope I don't have anything embarrassing in there. So when you sign up for the preview, so it's only developer preview at the moment, you have to sign up to actually see it. You get this history button. And what you see in your history is actually, they actually have already included several, so the history is private, standard. So they actually have included something here, they have included instant upload in it already, you have things you acquired via the Google Play Store. You have +1s in there, you have videos you have watched. So they actually include quite a lot of information in there already. And you as a developer have the possibility to write an application that writes into this history. So when you're in history, for some types you have the possibility to actually display the history on your profile. So the thing is, it doesn't create posts, but you can decide to make it visible to people. So what I did, for example, I did something which just keeps track of what I'm listening to on Google Music and writes it into my history, sort of like Scopling on Last.fm. And if I look on my profile, you get a new tab here, and you can decide what is visible to other people on this tab. And you can see I have, in this case, the music I've been listening to displayed on this tab. So actually, so what it does is it allows you automatically keeping track of stuff. Okay, I can doing something in the future as well. But yeah. So the way it looks like is when you have written it into the history, you can actually decide to share single moments out to your circles, which will create the post. But it won't create the post automatically. But for example, what you could do in your case, you could actually just write automatically the links to your post, to your blog posts into the history, and make the history visible on your profile, so everybody who visits your profile can actually see it.
Okay.
So that's one way to write into it. It won't create automatic posts because Google is very careful about spamming your stream. So this way you can spam your own history, but you don't spam others, unless they actually want to see it. So the thing about it, so at the moment you have to sign up for a developer preview at the URL above here, and then because this writes to a specific user, you need to use the authentication workflow. And to make it easier, Google has actually created a simple sign-in button which takes care of the flow for you. So if you just decide for a client-side flow, you just define some HTML and include a JavaScript. And then you have to enter your client ID, which you get on the console. And then you just define a callback function in JavaScript, which will retrieve the access token. Then you can use this access token to write to the API. If you want to make it cleaner, so to speak, and keep track of your user, you can do the same on the server side. So actually in this case, it's similar, but you actually have a redirect URI, which is a URL on your server, which takes care of the access token when it's received. And what you can also give, you can add a state, which will be returned as is, so you can actually know this state came from this user session, so you know that's not some other session tried to re-authenticate. And in this case, once the redirect URI has handled the access token, you actually have to call one function which will then complete the workflow for the user. Or if you don't want to use the button, you can just use any of two libraries you want. You just have to make sure you use the endpoint, and you need to request the scope. Actually, this scope, oh, it's not visible here. So actually, they changed the scope just like 2 days ago. It was just plus.moments.write, like 2 days ago. They changed it to read write now, so it's maybe an interesting development because at the moment you can't read moments yet, which of course is would be very interesting. And then you need also the plus.me scope, which allows the application access to your profile. And for example, what I've been doing is for the soundtrack I've been talking about, I've been written this is a Chrome extension. And for Chrome extension, you have the problem that if you call the server, the callback isn't fired because it's difficult, but there's actually an extension for Chrome extension which takes care that we redirect. It's a bit, it works. It's a sort of workaround that you can't actually register a callback directly inside into the Chrome extension. So, if we look at a moment has a specific type. So it can be a check-in, it can be a listen, it can be watch, it can be the most generic moments type, it's just an add activity, you add something to history, or maybe you have a create activity, you created something for your history. Then the most important thing is you need a URL which describes the moment. And that's one problem, that the URL, it has to be a public URL which describes the moment. which is probably at the moment the biggest limiting factor for the API, because you write something public into a private moment, so it's sort of backwards. But I'm going to talk about the target in a bit. And then you also have, for some types, you have a result which can be actually something like a comments or details about the moment. So the target is, for example, for a comment target would be a blog post, and the comment would be the actual thing you've written on the target. So this is actually information you put in there, a string or various types. And then you can also define a start date for the moment, and at the moment it's still possible to write moments in the future, so that's why I have the one. I have this one in the future here, so just for testing, because they didn't know that it was actually possible, and I tried it, and now I have the moment in there. And I hope I'm gonna keep it. I like it.
We'll enjoy that long night.
So maybe I'm experienced the moment.
Yeah.
So what happens now that you have defined the moment as a JSON object? What you want to do, you have one URL, so that's the only code, the history API, and also the moment. You write the moment for yourself, that's where you have the mean, into your vault, whatever vault is. And then you just make a post request, enter the body as JSON object, stringified, and add your access token in the header, so it's an authenticated request. And the debug variable actually makes sure that you get a response about what Google thinks that should be added to the moment. Otherwise you just get an empty success message. So that's just a simple example. I hope it's readable. So actually I just define here a simple add activity with the URL. Then I just open an HTTP request, just make sure I get the response, and then I goes to this URL, set application JSON content type, set my access token, and then just send the stringified moment. So it's pretty straightforward post request. You could do the same via the client library, but it's just the same if you do it in pure JavaScript. So what happens when you write the moment is that a Googlebot will come and access your target URL. And it will then try to read information about the target out of the URL. It tries first to go for schema.org markup. If it doesn't find it, tries to find some open data, title, information. And the important thing, for some activity types, there are some specific fields it requires. For example, if you want to do a check-in, the target actually has to include location data about the target. And if you write a song or listen activity, you want to have information about the song title, the artist, the album maybe. And the problem is, since you need a public URL, in some cases you won't find the public URL, so you have to create it yourself. And for example, from a song tracker, because there's no generally available resource where you can just link to a specific song, which is the library. Actually, what I did is, I just created a page where I pass all the parameters I want to have in the query string, and then I just submit this to history. In this case, to make the URL actually more useful, I'm fetching some videos from YouTube that people can actually listen to the song after I link them to it. And if we take a look at the source, it's actually straightforward. So that the JavaScript is just to fetch the videos. The interesting part is down here. So I define schema.org markup. This is a music recording in this case. I have an image for the album, I have the name of the song, I have the artist, and the artist is actually a sub-scheme.org. So the artist item scope, which is the music group and has a name. And you can actually define more variables, like this song is a specific album, and so all those types are actually pretty well explained in the official documentation. But I think I have the, yeah, so when you submit the song, this is actually the target information that will be extracted, where you have the song name, you have the artist, and all the subscopes. So that's the information that Google retrieves, and this is the information which will be saved as the moment in history. So let's see, there's actually demo that Google provides, which allows you just to test all this. So you have a sign-in button here with client-side flow, which just opens the authentication workflow. In my case, I'm already authenticated, but you would be asked if you allow the application to do all the stuff for you. And then you can just, you see, I'm just going to make an add activity and write it. And in this case, you're just sending this moment, and you get this reply with the information that has been received. And if I look back to my history, I have here a new moment added today. So I think, yeah, history API. Questions? No questions. Okay. So about the Hangouts API, so I'm going to give a code lab about the Hangouts API tomorrow. So I'm just going to touch the surface today in this talk if you want to go into detail, because the Hangouts API is best learned by doing, as many times, but actually in this case we're going to see. So what the Hangouts API allows you, actually what it does is it just renders the web app inside of an iframe, inside of the Hangout, which already consists of many iframes. So, and inside from this iframe where your web app is run, you have an API to call outside to the Hangout to do stuff and call back into the request information from the Hangout, which is running outside. And the most important thing when you do a Hangout application is you need to define your application inside of XML. So you define the name of your application. You require the RPC fuse feature, which allows you communication from your iframe to the Hangout and back again. And then just in here you define, you probably want to have a style sheet in there. You need the Hangouts API JavaScript, which includes all the calls. Then you include you define your app, and then you probably would have some JavaScript which does all the work you want to be done. And when you are done with this, you're just gonna switch over to the console part here. Because when you have activated the Hangouts API, you get a new menu item here for Hangouts, which you link to your application, and you can define if it's a main application or the extension. The difference is a main application will cover the whole video frame. If it's an extension, it will only run on the side and the main video will remain running. And then you can define some explanations, some icons which will be displayed. And what we're going to do is we're just going to jump into a Hangout now to see our amazing application. And there we go. That's an Hangout application. But the interesting thing now is that you can actually, even if it's just an empty frame, you can actually do a lot with the Hangout API already, like it is. So I'm going to open the developer tools. Just larger. So the important thing is when you're debugging Hangout applications, is because you're running inside of an iframe, you have to actually switch to this iframe before you do any debugging, which will always be something like gadget something in this case. And then here we can already call our Hangout API object. And if you look here, you have all sorts of different functions and namespaces which you can access. So for example, we can call our Gabby.hangout.getParticipants, which will in this case give just me, because I'm the only one in this Hangout, but it will give you all the other people in the Hangout as well. So you get the display index, which the display index is just in what order the icons below will appear. You get if I have the app running or not, if I have a camera, microphone, So this here is a unique participant ID. So theoretically, I could join the same Hangout with the same person, but I would have a different Hangout ID. And then inside of the person object, I actually have some basic Google Plus information about my display name ID again, which you could use to fetch more data via the Google Plus API. And I actually have an avatar item which I could use if I want in the application. So let's see what I have here. We did that. Ah yeah, so I missed that one. So the important thing is before you start using the API, you actually have to wait for the API to be ready for you to use. So you have add an event function which waits for the on API ready event, and then after this has been called, you do all the rest. And for the participants, you actually, for everything you can access in the API, you also have event objects. So if participants join, leave, you actually get an event for that which you can register and make your app respond to new people coming in, people leaving, which is happening all the time. And you actually not only have this, you have all sorts of different functions to access participants. You can just access the current local user. You can access a specific user if you have the participant ID. And then you also have different kinds of participants. You can have enabled participants, which are people who are using actively the app. And you have normal participants which don't, and you can actually have specific callbacks for people who start the app, people who who enter, people who leave. So you have all sorts of things you can query for. In most cases, if you just use the on participants changed, you have all those covered, but if you just need one of them, you don't need to register the whole event. Let's see. So I think the most interesting feature about Hangouts is the shared state, which allows you to, well, to suggest you have one state for the app and all people have access to this one shared state, so you can use this shared state to exchange information between participants. The shared state is just simply an object with string keys, string values, and it's preserved inside of the Hangout. So if you leave the Hangout and come back later with the same app, it still has the same state, so you can also use this to make sure you don't lose information. If you lose connection, drop off the Hangout, come back, you can still access the same information. What is happening when you write to the state, it's asynchronous, so you can't just write to the state and read right afterwards. You have to wait for an on-state changed event. And the problem is if two people try to write the same key at the same time, the last person will overwrite the value. So if you want to make sure that you have so you don't have a blocking mechanism, so you have to make sure one way is to actually not have one key for you want, but actually have one key per participant, which you have with the participant ID to make sure that the last one counts, because you actually have the timestamp of when the key was written. And the other problem is, which I'm going to show you, I can just manipulate the state directly in the API. So if I know my way around, I can just go into the console and just set a value. And actually, in this case, in this application, I have defined an on-state changed event. So you can see that in this case, I have added keys to the. I added my test key with this timestamp, and I get access to the full state object. So I can go ahead and just set a second value. And in this case, I have again one key added to the state, which is my test2, and I have the full state object, which has my two objects now. And so if I know my way around, I can just go ahead and just delete one value because I don't like it. So that's one thing you have to be careful about when developing a Hangout application, especially if it's something like, I don't know, like games where you have a score to keep and people just go in and change the score. So it's dangerous, but then again, if people do that all the time, then people just won't play with them anymore. So. But it's easy to manipulate, so it's nothing secure about this state object. It's just available for everyone who is in the Hangout and running the app. So if you want, you could add some description or make sure that other people check back if the state is still valid. You could add some security mechanism, but it always depends on how much effort you want to put into it and how much gain you get from it. So for the applications I'm writing, it's mostly just, okay, yeah, do whatever you want. You're for it if it doesn't work. So you can, as you can see, in this case I have just set one value. What I can also do, I can actually submit multiple values at the same time. So I have submit delta. In this case, I just define the new values you want to have added. Let's see if I can write correctly. And at the second, which we didn't have here. The second one, and then I can also define in the second parameter that I want to delete my test2 state variables. You can actually make batch requests like this to just push out all of them at the same time. Because the state, how often you can write to the state, it's limited. So you have some, I think you shouldn't go beyond one update per second, I think it's at the moment, which is still quite a lot. I'm not sure if they lifted this at some point, but that was the last thing I realized, that after a certain while when you submit the state too often you get blocked for a while, you can't submit until time out. But in this case, if you submit this, you see we have two new values, and we actually have one remove key, so I have removed S2 key. If you really need to have lots of updates because you want to have some kind of real-time updating of the application, because you want to show if people move the mouse, you want to see others that they move the mouse, you can use messages. A message is simply a string, but you can just take any JSON object and stringify it to send it out. And it's actually quite quick delivery, so if you're, especially if you're on a quick connection, you can get to just a couple of milliseconds of timeout. And the thing is, if you send out a message, it's gone. You send it out and whoever reads it, who doesn't read it, doesn't. And you might actually lose messages on the way. So that's actually a system that just try to, if you want to update the state, just push it out whenever you can. And you will maybe lose something in between, but then you have the next message coming in a couple of milliseconds again. And I actually can't show this at the moment because I'm the only one with the Hangout. But if we can try this tomorrow in the code lab if someone is interested. So let's see. Time. Yeah, I think so. There are many things actually you can do in the API. You can create video overlays which show on your face. I'm maybe just gonna show some examples because it's easier. Not screen share. So you probably know if you've been using, you know probably the Google Effects overlay. So actually in this case you see this is the extension which is running on the side. The white thing here is still our amazing application running. But if I just, okay, we have good quality, but I can, you can just, I'm just gonna add a beard. If it works out there. Yeah. So that's just, you can see that, but that's a face tracking, actually follows my face. But you can also add static overlays, which you, for example, the lower third application, if you want just to have your title on there. What you can also do, what I quite like, you can have actually access to the raw face tracking information. So someone did a very nice sample app for this. I can just start this and then I can wiggle my head around. So you see it's actually pretty fast, the face tracking. So the important thing about most of those features that they are all depend on the Google Talk plugin. So sometimes when they add new features, you have to make sure you have the newest version of the Talk plugin that they actually work. But they are usually rather quick with pushing out the necessary updates. And I think my face is not bad this time. So let's see if I have some choice. Overlays, face tracking. Yeah, so there's quite a lot more information. Like you have all sorts of events you can call. You can actually track the volume level of the participants. You can actually change the output volume of participants. So you have all sorts of things you can interact with. You can turn off your camera, and if you can't make it to the code lab tomorrow, I actually, where is it, wrote a small application. Let's see. Which allows you to play with the Hangouts API, because as you can see, I keep track of all sorts of information in here. I have the face tracking, raw data in here, and I actually allow you to execute code in here, so you can have some example of what you can do. So if I execute this, I get updated my shared state. So that's something I thought would be nice with people who just want to play around, because then you don't have to switch to the console and you actually see some feedback in there.
You do a beautiful thing here with just two heads and bouncing the ball between them.
Yeah, that's possible actually. And then you can actually, I'm just going to show it, just one code for creating a static overlay. So I have created this one, static doesn't flip with me. So there's just some stuff you can do on the day. Just going to see if I can make a bit of this now. Then this goes execute. Yeah, like that. So as I said, so all of the documentation is at developers.google.com/plus. That's where I have all the information.
Do you see any way to use the Hangouts API on Android?
Not yet.
Okay.
But I hope they will open it in some way someday. But as you can see, there's lots of stuff going on, especially with the layout. So one thing, you have to actually take care of the layout anyway, because you have to make sure, because the window size can change quite a lot, so you have to make sure that your application fits in it, because you can just add a chat in here and the dimensions change. So actually when you write the Hangout application, you already have to make sure that it fits all the time. So you have to make sure it's dynamic, so it should work on, if you make a proper CSS layout, it should at least display correctly on the...
Yeah, but the Google Talk plugin is...
Yeah, the problem is that the way the Hangout communicates with the Android app is completely different than the way it communicates on PC, because everything is done via the Google Talk plugin, really. So I hope that at some point they will get rid of the... Yeah. and use proper techniques for it.
Right.
And let's see, yeah, you have the client libraries we talked about that. And all the slides and documentation and source codes will be available at this address, orderplus.com/devfest.
So I'm now, just for the fun of it, thinking if you've got a mobile enabled smartphone,
yeah,
you can do a Wi-Fi thing from two people and they can play table tennis in their in a hangout.
Yeah, actually,
using their phones, yeah.
But actually they did a demo at some conference not too long ago where they actually played table tennis with their faces in a hangout.
Oh,
they did a demo like that.
Cool.
Actually, they had 4 people playing table tennis with that. It looked hilarious. So actually, I think a lot of the fun of Hangout application is really you have to see that you actually make it that people interact. So you don't want just something displayed in there boring stuff, but you actually want people to enhance the Hangout, because Hangouts are a cool tool used for communication. So you have to, when you write apps, you have to see that they fit in and not just some thing you could do on a website without any interaction in a way. And actually, because it's just JavaScript, you can do everything in there, so I had some WebGL running in there already as well. It tears a bit on the CPU if you have WebGL and the Hangout running, but it works. Yeah, questions again. Third part of questions. As I said, if you're interested in the Hangouts API, there's going to be a code lab tomorrow. I'm not sure at what time it is, but it's on schedule.
Can you give us a very quick subject matter of that?
Yeah, it's about the Hangouts. Actually, to see it yourself how it works, play with the API.
Okay, so
Actually, you're just going to form a hangout of people and then we play with the API and see how things react. If you have more than one people inside, it gets more interesting.
yeah.
And maybe just for the people who have never seen Hangout applications and use them, just to get the first feeling what Hangout applications can do. And if you want, you can actually start to have a basic template for a Hangout app, which is just our white screen. And you can start from there, really, just.
I was a hangout version until for about 10 minutes. So thank you.
That's about it.